Hello, Wine and Dine listeners. This month, we are going to be featuring a winery called Hansen Vineyards. This is a family-run winery. And the really cool thing that we found out when we were visiting this winery is that the winemaker originally went to college in Ithaca, is from Oregon, but went to college in Ithaca, spent some time in Washington, D.C. He was super cool to talk to because he was more in the lawmaking side. So we had a little conversation about that, and then moved back to Oregon and his family farm with very, very deep roots in the area to, which I loved because they actually have that family farm and very deep roots. Of course, I loved that it was deep roots with Rooted Planning Group, but we had a chance to actually talk with them, with the winemaker when we were there. So much fun. If you want to follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, it's Hansen Vineyards. So you can follow them there. But one thing that I discovered when I was there was that his great-grandfather's winemaker's great-grandfather was originally from Norway and moved to Oregon in 1896, purchased the farm that was across the road from the winery. They then took the property into a winery in 1930. So that's when it says very deep roots. That's what they mean. Well, let me tell you, we love their wine. Of course, they had a good Pinot Noir. That's what Oregon is known for. But today, what I'm going to talk about is their Gamay. The Gamay Noir is one of the different grapes that exists, and we loved it. It was unique. It was dry. It was mouthful, flavorful, really savored the wine. So if you enjoy something different, go try the Gamay Red that they have. It's $26 per bottle. Good price point. Of course, if you're going to have it shipped, there's additional costs associated with it. But we really enjoyed their Gamay. They do have a club that you can join if you're interested. Not trying to sell this company, of course, but I do really think that if you're looking for something different, there's no cost to join, which I absolutely love. If you get out to Oregon, there's complimentary wine tasting for you and your guests. You get 15% off the first 12 bottles each year. And then if you go beyond that, you get 25% off. You also have access to new and limited wines. And they do have some invitations that you can get invited to. One is out in July. Maybe it changes different each year. And then they do invite you to vertical tastings. Now, of course, we won't be able to be there, but we did talk to Jason, the winemaker, and ask if there's any way we could virtually do that. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. If we learn more, we'll certainly let you all know. One thing that I loved that Jason said to us is whether you're a wine connoisseur or a novice, I should say, he's very open to questions. And he really, truly embodied that. So, he said no questions are a dumb question. And we can usually get pretty deep in the weeds if you want, which is what we loved about our conversation. So we'd love for you to hop out onto their website, explore them. We're going to post a link in the Facebook page. And if you do happen to buy anything from them and he wants to know how you found out about us, just drop our name, Amy and Brent Irvine, or Wine and Dime Podcast. Thanks, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and financial vineyard. We take you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that help craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Welcome to this edition of Wine and Dime with Amy Irvine and Kerrie Beene. Welcome to the show, Kerrie, once again.
Ooh.
So, as always, I'd like to start the show with any particular wines that you've come across lately, or anything that you would share with listeners that might be refreshing for the summer.
Well, I haven't had any wine recently. I don't know why. It's just haven't. The only
kind of been busy lately. Yeah.
Yes, definitely the busiest time of my life, I feel. The only thing that I drank recently that I would say is sort of refreshing for the summer it's called a High Noon. I had never heard of it until recently. But it's sort of a seltzer type drink. It's got like some vodka and juice. So like it'll be like blackberry or pineapple or something like that. So I was at a restaurant and had one of those recently, and it was really refreshing. If you like seltzers, was pretty good. So yeah.
Huh. Well, we'll have to look that up and put it in the show notes for folks, because that's something that's very different from our normal wine recommendation. And with the topic that we're going to be covering today around raising financial independently children, you might need to grab something just to sort of sip away on it. Because it's July that we're releasing this podcast, we thought we'd make the connection to Independence Day, independence just in and of itself. And Kate and I recorded previously the financial independence conversation, like what is it in general? But Kerrie, you've got 2 young adults in your household. And, we joke sometimes about the failure to launch idea, or, not being an enabler if you can't financially afford to be an enabler. And even if you can, do you want to be, kind of type thing. So you and I thought it might be a good idea to sort of chat a little bit about that, and also to, kind of give some tips maybe around what are some things that parents can do to help their children become financially independent, and to avoid that kind of lack of financial knowledge, so that they can run their lives independently and not go to the bank of mom and dad.
Yeah, definitely something that we've already kind of went through with my daughter. She's 19, she'll be 20 in the fall, and then my son's 16. So they're sort of in different phases, but teaching them, and I wouldn't say we've done a perfect job, but, teaching them about money and talking to them about spending and things like that is definitely in the forefront of our minds right now.
What are some of the things that you've done over the years, and how early did you start? Because that's a question that I often get. How early should I start teaching my kids about money?
I wouldn't say we just really started doing the lessons super early. One thing we did when they were small is we opened them both savings account at our local bank, just to kind of introduce the idea of saving money. We're very fortunate in that we have a very large family on my side and a sort of large family on my husband's side. So, birthdays and things like that, they would give presents, but there was always family members who gave money and things like that. So early on, we taught them, you can spend a little bit of your money, but why don't we save some of it? So over the years, we've put, birthday money and Christmas money and things like that into a savings account. And it's sort of been out of sight, out of mind. We've not really let them go pull from it. There's been a few instances where they've pulled from it as they've gotten older, but we've encouraged them to save for that. And it actually, with my daughter who's entered college already, it's been a very helpful resource for her, for sure. And the first thing we did for my son was recently we let him pull a little bit of money out of his, because he got a vehicle. He got an old vehicle that had a tape player in it. So we let him spend a little bit of money and update so he could actually listen to the radio and stuff in that vehicle.
That's funny.
Yeah. Classic vehicle, we would say. So that was their introduction, I think, to money early on, was just slowly introducing them to saving money and letting them see this is how much is in your savings account. And actually physically taking them to the bank when they were smaller, which probably isn't as much as a thing now as it was back then, letting them walk into the bank and take their money and have the little savings book where the teller writes in it. So that was something they started early on. Mm-hmm.
And what, with regards to like thinking, so Raylan's off in college now. She's, got her own expenses when she's up there. Did you guys work on a budget for her, or is that something that she did? Is that something you think about with Rainer? Like, are there other things that, and I think they've seen you guys work the budget, like you've included them in some of those conversations, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, we have. Mainly, not necessarily day in, day out bills and expenses. Mm-hmm. But the big thing that we've included them on is our vacation planning, because that's something that they can see us save for, and then they can see us spend, and they can understand how much things cost. So they've always sort of involved them in, hey, this is where we're going. This is how much it's going to cost. This is what we're saving for. And then sometimes I'll use that as a reminder of, like, when they want to do things, hey, this is an expense. Remember, we're going on vacation, and we really want to spend our money on vacation versus this short-term thing they were wanting to do. So I think when they were younger, we involved them in that. As they've gotten older, we've not necessarily, they're not included in our, bill paying conversations as much, but we do make them aware of what's going on and how much things cost. So that piece of it. As far as, with Raylan being further along and in college, before she moved to college, we, at some point in time, she opened a checking account, and we connected it to her savings account, and she, got the online banking app, and I pretty much had her be responsible for her own money. Okay. So, when she was in high school, she didn't have as many as expenses, so it wasn't a big deal. But once she moved to college, we had sort of discussed her not working at least the first semester, maybe the first year, depending on how her cash flow went, because it is a huge transition to go from a very, very small town to a very large Division I college. And we didn't really know what to expect academically. She did get into honors college, so we were concerned about it being, a big transition grade-wise, and we really wanted her to focus on her academics and adjust and be able to come home. So what we did for her money was we said, okay, let's look at the first month and sort of see how much you spend. But we come up with an amount that said, let's move this much from your savings to your checking, and this will be your gas money and your spending money, and you need to pay attention to how much is in your checking account and if it's getting low. So we sort of made her responsible for her own spending. Mm-hmm. And we were fortunate enough that she worked quite a bit in high school and had saved money throughout her life, that we didn't have to give her a lot of spending money. But she did a really good job sort of planning out. We're fortunate that she's not a big spender. So she was able to do just fine, sort of budgeting her money and planning out the 2 semesters that she's been there so far. And she did okay with that.
What a nice protective way to do this, though. I mean, she's early in her college career. You didn't tell her what to spend the money on. You just said, this is the bucket. Mm-hmm. And you can choose how that money is allocated, or, what buckets the money goes into. I'm not telling you how to spend it, but here's the resource. Mm-hmm. So as she moves up throughout her college and then eventually gets a job like that, she's going to know how to budget her money at that point in time. What a gift that you've really given her from that perspective, and in my humble opinion.
Thank you. It felt like a slow transition, but, a little bit easier than, I don't know. And also her living in the dorm, she don't actually have any bills. So, I think it was good for her to just, okay, you're responsible for mainly your gas and food that you don't eat on campus, because she had a meal plan on campus. So it was maybe a small transition versus, oh, here's an apartment and bills and all these things all of a sudden she was responsible for. I think it made it easier to sort of slowly transition her to, being on her own cash flow wise. Yeah,
I think also starting out young, we always talk about baby steps and any goals that are being set. And I think, if you start early, you've transitioned during a period of time where it's seemed easy because she doesn't have a lot of big responsibilities yet. But then when she does start to take on some of those big responsibilities, she'll have the tools to understand how to utilize that money for sure. How about Rainer? He's a little bit younger. He's where, Raylan was 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. Well, 4 years ago.
It's about 3.5.
Yeah. Where you mentioned that he recently took some money out of his accounts for a car, and do you see any difference at all between like boys and girls? Because that's a question I get a lot too.
I don't know if it's a boys and girls thing or just a personality thing. He's not frugal like she is. He's more of I don't know if it's just being at that age too, when you're 16 and you play sports, you're hungry all the time. Most of his money, he just constantly wants to spend his money on food, even though we have food at home. It's, he's one of those kids, like he just wants to spend all his money eating. But he has the same, we've done the same thing with him, the savings account. We let him take some of it out. He, spend it on the upgrade on his truck. And that's the only thing he's really had to take it out for so far. He's very active in sports, and we try to give him spending money day in and day out and help him with gas. But there was, with the way things are right now and inflation, as a family, we're like, hey, are we spending spending money on things that we shouldn't be. Right. And it's not really that I can't necessarily pay for things, but it's a choice. And this is just a small example of something I did this week, actually. A couple of years ago for Christmas, we got the Apple Music. So there's it's like a monthly subscription, and I think we had the family plan, and it was like, it's $14.99 or around $15 a month, which isn't a huge deal. But my husband and I do not use it at all. Like, we just don't. We listen to Pandora or whatever. We don't use it. And so, of course, teenagers, they're using it a lot more, I'm sure. I don't know how much they use it. But I was like, you know what? That Christmas present has ran its course. I've paid probably, over the course of since we bought it, $300 or more for them to have this. And so I sent them, we have a group message in the four of us. And I said, hey, I'm canceling this.
If you want it, you need to pay for it, right?
And I did see an option where there's a student account for $5 a month. And I told them that. And immediately, he was like, well, I want the student account. So I thought, I'm not paying for your student account. It is just $5. But I thought, this may be time for us to open a checking account for him. He can start putting some of the money. He don't earn a lot of money, but he's doing some lawn mowing this summer and odding in jobs and earning money here and there. So he can start putting some of that money in the checking account. He can pay that $5 a month himself. And I thought this would be a good way to teach him, like, hey, you need to make sure there's at least $5 in your checking account where your Apple Music's going to get canceled because you don't have the money to pay for it. So that's actually on my agenda for this week. He really won't. My daughter didn't say a word about it, so I don't know if she'll keep doing it or not. But, it's a small introduction to your first bill.
Yeah. That's a great way. I mean, that's a little thing, $5 a month, right? But it's, you want it, you get it. It's right. A great way for them to take ownership of something that they want to spend their money on.
Right.
I mean, that's a perfect one, $5 a month.
Yep.
When he doesn't feel that he wants it anymore or doesn't find the value behind it, then he can cancel it, but it's not on your shoulders anymore.
Right.
I love that. And I do, again, I don't like to genderize things in any way, shape, or form, but you brought up the point that it's a personality thing. Like, he's not a saver. She was a saver. She's not that much of a spender, although she spends on what she wants and she needs to. He is more of a spender. Is there different different ways that you approach their different personalities then?
Oh, for sure. I don't know that there's any one specific thing that I've ran across just yet money-wise, other than I know I'm going to have to sort of guide him a lot closer than I did her. Obviously she's very open book with me. She's like, Mom, log into my checking account for me. Like if she's driving home or something and she was worried about her money, she would always have me check and things. Whereas I don't know that he's going to stay on top of it as much as she does. So I'll be curious to see. He just seems, not that he's not responsible, he's very responsible, but I don't know. He just seems to be more of a spender, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'll be curious to see how he does over the next few years.
So if you were talking to somebody as a client and you're trying to, talk to them about their children, are there any specific tips that you would give them? Or are there anything that you would say, ideas that you would say, well, try this or do this? I mean, I love the things that you mentioned, like, giving them small bill responsibilities, incremental small bill responsibilities, and starting early, and, talking to them about managing their budget. But are there any, let's say nobody has started with any of that stuff. What would be a really good baby step that somebody could implement if they haven't started at all with their children?
I think opening a savings account and just introducing them to saving money, probably that way. Or even if you don't, just teaching them mindfulness about how you spend your money and talking to them, just like I mentioned earlier about the vacation thing with my kids, if you spend your money on this, then you won't have it to spend on this. So just sort of walking through and introducing that concept. Obviously, it needs to be age appropriate, but, introducing them to, if you spend your money today, then you won't have it tomorrow. And not that you always want your kids to save their money, because sometimes letting them spend it today is a lesson too. So I would say that introducing them to the opportunity cost, as we would talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, Kerrie. Well, I think, as always, I feel like, we have wonderful conversations around family and kids and just in general. And I love what you're doing. As I've said to you many, many times, I just think that, the things that you do with your kids and the example that you're setting and the lessons that you're giving them are just amazing. I think you're one of the most incredible women and families that I see. And I know nobody's perfect and all of that sort of stuff, but some of the things that you've implemented have really created some good foundations. And I'm so happy that you're willing to share some of that on a personal note with our listeners and with clients so that they can get some ideas too. And if you love this podcast as much as I do and listening to Kerrie, please feel free to share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, like it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, I guess, is the only one I didn't mention. And also, leave us comments on iTunes and rate us, because that actually helps move the podcast up in the rankings so more people find us and can get access to these great tips that this awesome team that we have has with their own personal lives and with all the things that they help clients with. We hope you've enjoyed this show, and we'd love to hear more from you. If there's any particular topics that you'd like to hear about, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to talk about the things you want to know about. Thanks all.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dime. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.